Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for making your way through and joining us for our first breakaway session of the day. I'm glad to see many of you keen on our country and sector focus, looking at a francophone state, which is certainly quite ripe for investment, as we heard earlier on in conversations today. The progress and the layout for today's format will be that it's an engaging conversation, so do feel free to raise your hand, ask questions, object to certain statements, even engage even further with regard to some of the themes that will be explored by our two speakers today. So we kindly invite you to participate in conversation with us and feel free to engage. We do have an hour to really unpack some of the nuts and bolts regarding Cameroon as Africa's new hotspot specifically. Also feel free to get some insight as to how Cameroon as a nation competes with its other francophone states in West Africa, and of course some ideals with regard to particular sectors which are ripe for development, economic fundamentals, and of course policies that enable the investment to take place. We'll have two speakers engaging in this conversation and driving it forward. They'll be joining us on stage and hopefully leaving you a lot more enlightened with regard to investment potential in Cameroon. Ladies and gentlemen, joining us firstly, please welcome on stage Mr. NJ Ayuk, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Centurion Law Group based in Cameroon. He'll be followed by Nyonga Fofang, Managing Director of Bambili Group here in South Africa. Gentlemen, the stage is yours, and enjoy.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I was told that the food was free, so I can't charge billable time as a lawyer when there's free food around. But when you start hearing about infrastructure, you can only think as a lawyer how much money you can make. But I am very honored to share the podium with Mr. Nyonga Fofang, who is somebody that I respect a lot, has been not just a Cameroon-focused investor himself. He has been somebody that has been an Africa-focused investor, has really done a lot within the continent on the infrastructure side and the energy side to really develop, can you hear me? To really develop key projects. We at Centurion Law Group, we work with a lot of investors like you. We do work a lot with many corporations trying to do various infrastructure projects in the country. And Cameroon as a country has always been one where we keep saying it's ripe for investment, but a lot of the investment has been government-driven or sometimes big mega projects which are certainly either Chinese-driven or coming out of the big mega banks like the African Development Bank. And I think I'll let Mr. Nyonga talk a little bit about that. But on a short intro, we have seen an investment climate that has benefited from their OHADA rules, which is like the harmonization of business laws from most of the Francophone countries, and where they had all this regulatory framework that tried to say, let's ease in doing business. Of course, there are challenges. There are always going to be challenges when you have people and investors like you coming from a different kind of market, different kind of background, are really approaching this. Cameroon still enjoys a very diversified economy. That diversified economy you have where you see even with the slowdown in the commodity space, which oil and gas and things like that have really reduced, but infrastructure is still something that is really lacking. Government has tried a little bit to create an enabling environment which can really propel some things, but there's still a lot that needs to be done, and the country has not really been challenged a lot to see real new investment that is coming from the private sector that can even challenge it to improve its growth. So I would hope to have an interesting dialogue with you, and feel free, as we say in Cameroon, no questions are taboo. Feel free to have to share with me your experiences, and I could also share with you guys mine. I would let Mr. Nyonga do an intro, and he's actually the smart one, so he would have more good things to say.
Thank you, NJ. As a lawyer, they're never short of words, you know, because they get paid for the stuff. So I'm not surprised with a lovely intro. Why Cameroon, and why now? I think that as Google introduced earlier on, we are presenting, we're going to share with you guys our views on potential investment opportunities in Cameroon. It's peculiar, Cameroon. It's not necessarily just a francophone country, as it is a bilingual country. It's one of the few ones in the continent where English and French is the official language. So even though it tends to fall under the so-called francophone, it's really a bilingual country. So for those of us who are of the English persuasion, you can still do business in Cameroon. And even with because of that complexity or peculiarity, there are two sort of legal systems. NJ will share that with you later on. Why Cameroon? Right now, Cameroon, I think, makes a good investment destination for various reasons. It's still, it's part of the sort of CEMAC region, which is the Central African Monetary Region. And as private equity type investment goes, they're sort of lacking, you know, they fall under the Francophone Africa sort of model where development seems to be centrally driven, and for some reason it's too slower in getting into the sort of expectation that I would like to see. Why now? I think if you look at it on a sort of a global perspective, you know, spreads are very, very thin, you know, US, Europe, in this sort of low volatility environment. If you're looking for good yields, where are you going to go for? You want to go to investment destinations like Cameroon, which are still fairly backward. I won't use the backward, fairly, you know, underexploit, you know, thank you. You know, as a lawyer, again, they have fancy way with words. So Cameroon, I would say, at this moment in time, give you that wonderful investment opportunity for a couple of reasons. The demography is, you know, it's on the right side. The population is sort of between 20 and 55. That's sort of the majority with majority seats. It's growing at 4.2 relative to the rest of the CEMAC region. Inflation is around 3%. So, you know, some of the, you know, the motivating elements are there. The government is fairly stable, quasi-democratic structure with a central or dominant ruling party and sort of fractious opposition. So it gives you sort of a stable environment for investment opportunity. Across the board, what do we see happening in Cameroon? There's a lot of infrastructure transactions taking place. There is a big deficit in terms of quality investment, be it from a real estate perspective, be it high end or low end. And it's just a function of just sort of market nuance. I think, you know, you don't have a lot of investment attention there yet, just because of its peculiarity. And I think with conferences of this nature and sharing some of our ideas would give you guys a bit of an insight on what could be done in the Cameroon real estate sector. So on that note, I'd sort of give it back to NJ, and we could take it from there.
I would like to open and also reiterate what Mr. Nyonga said before we pass it on to questions. Key issues. You can repatriate funds. The currency is still pegged under the euro, the franc CFA. You are still going to see a regulatory environment that is still, it's still open. As Mr. Nyonga mentioned, you have this bicameral system, but also you have a hybrid system where you have the English common law and the civil law when it comes into doing business there. But project-wise, mostly you've been able, and I think most people don't give the state that compliment. They've been able to draw up special regulatory programs for special investment projects. Let's say you want to create a special economic empowerment zone. They will be able to carve out something and work on something with you, which you would have the right kind of incentives, whether it is tax exonerations, whether it is custom exonerations that would permit goods to come in at a certain rate. But also, you are also going to see some incentives that they have within the investment laws, but most of the time, most people just don't use it. I think the Chinese have been they've been very, very savvy in using that, which have allowed much more ability of international investors to bring in labor without using local labor, even though government really has a drive to encourage local employment, but you still find that with highly skilled. So I wouldn't mind, or I would open for further questions with Mr. Nyonga and I, and let's just have a dialogue on Cameroon, and please feel free to throw in as many questions as you can.
We think that this session should be much more interactive, because on that basis, it will sort of give us an idea, the general audience an idea on what the possibilities are in Cameroon. I think it would have been easy for us to put up a fancy slide and run down. You know, you guys probably all have research teams that have come up with slides. So we thought that it would be better to share our knowledge about Cameroon. We've done a lot of work in Cameroon. Angie has a law firm there. I also have business in Cameroon. I also happen to sit on the board of Standard Chartered Bank in Cameroon, which is one of the big banks there in terms of its market reach. So on that basis, we have, you know, a bit of an insight in terms of what the possibilities are. So on that note, we thought we just have this sort of interactive session. So please feel free. We don't want to have a monologue. You know, we could. We do that every other evening when we meet in Cameroon. But we don't want to continue. So on that basis, please, you know, feel free, and we can take it from there.
Hi, my name is Nenna Linta. I work for Brawl Property Services in Nigeria. Since you mentioned Standard Chartered Bank, I was just visiting Cameroon about 6 weeks ago on their behalf. And one of the things that a lot of corporates in Cameroon are looking for is international grade office buildings, and which there's a dearth of supply in. And I guess my question to you is, why has there not been any development in that area to date? And do you see that that's something that would attract development going forward? Are there enough corporates there for, you know, to actually make a business case for developers, international developers, to come in and change the marketplace there?
Yes, you're right. There is an absence of high quality sort of mixed-use development or commercial development of any nature in Cameroon. What we have in Cameroon so far is sort of legacy property sort of setup, which was sort of government driven from the 60s. I think it's a function of leadership. I think like most of the typical African cases, they were, you know, taking their time until most recently, where there's a big demand, there's a massive urbanization, population growth is significant, and also in terms of capacity, we'll have tremendous investment flows into Cameroon from the infrastructure space in particular, water development projects, port development projects. So you're having a lot of investment inflow into Cameroon, and there's a need for that. And I think the government and private sectors, you know, realize that. As I said, Cameroon is slightly peculiar. You know, it's a sort of the French and English model, and the French model has been oftentimes centrally driven, where the government lead and the private sector follow, whereas in other investment destinations, is sort of have a private sector, public-private sector participation exercise. Cameroon is changing, and it's a function of the present market reality globally. And of course, being close to Nigeria, with this tremendous momentum, it's but sort of spilled over to Cameroon. So there is a big need for that. Douala, Yaoundé, which are the two, you know, big cities in Cameroon. I can tell you, you know, I mean, you've been to Douala, you realize that even where Standard Bank, Standard Chartered offices are, you know, it's a nice, okay building, but it's been there, you know, since I was a kid. So yes, there is a tremendous opportunities for investors. There is a big need for high value property of the scale that would attract investment. And I think also, and I believe, you know, that there is tremendous local capacity to fit into that sector.
I would just start from a simple fashion. There is no brand name hotel in the biggest economic city, Douala. You can have a Marriott, you can find a Hilton, you can find a Radisson, you wouldn't. And that's an economics, it's at the economic capital of the country, with the largest airport. And I think, if I'm wrong, it's about 5 going on to 6 million people. So you have a population of about 6 million. It's a central hub of the Central African states, the whole CEMAC. So you're looking at Gabon, Congo, Brazzaville, Equatorial Guinea, Sao Tome, Chad, Central Africa. And it has one of the largest ports that actually feed into the landlocked countries like Central Africa and Chad. And the biggest city, you do not have a brand hotel in there. And forgive my French, the hotels are crap. So that is a big opportunity. It's a big space for anybody who looks at putting investments there, because these are investment drivers. Once people start seeing these kind of movements, then you start seeing different activities happening. Now, is there, when I look at from a client perspective, most of the clients that I get to work with, a lot come from the oil and gas sector. A lot come from even some of the humanitarian sector when you look at issues happening around Central Africa and in Chad. These are high demand. These are high demanding clients where they want some kind of service sector that is bolstered. So those issues they are lacking, and it's not just an issue to say it's a lack of financing or anything. I still think sometimes in Africa we have to be honest with ourselves. Not as much as we need these things to happen, like you properly raised, we have to also create an enabling environment to ensure that your investment and those coming in, it's going to be protected and it's going to be engaged. Like Mr. Nyonga mentioned, the private sector has not properly engaged government. They have not properly driven government to make certain changes that have to be done. As much as government is centralized and want things to be done, they don't know any better. I'm not saying you're not smart people, but if you have a bureaucrat, and as it is around Africa, they would not really see it with the same lens as somebody who is going in and saying, I want a return on investment. So I do see that as an opportunity. I make a lot of money with the chaos, but that's good. But I do see that as an opportunity for you to see those openings and say, I'm going to put something here and I'm really, really going to drive. The returns are really, 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 really high. I could tell you that. As a law firm and doing services around that area, most of the guys who I do the same work with them in South Africa or the US, they wish they were in my position. That's as far as I could go.
Just to come back, I want to continue on that line on why now, why. I think there is there's a whole Afro-pessimism issue also which affected all the investment destinations across the continent. Where you have sort of one brush across the board in terms of the issues and potential risk, environment, and how enabling it is. Cameroon suffered from that also. It doesn't mean it wasn't a good investment destination. If you look at Cameroon, you have to look at Central Africa. As Angie mentioned, Cameroon basically is the gateway into Chad, Gabon, Central African Republic, and even Equatorial Guinea. Yes, there were sort of, and all countries I've just mentioned are oil-dependent economies. So, clearly, when the go-go days of the oil prices were, the government were there. The government were, basically beneficiaries of that wonderful rise in oil prices. So there wasn't a need, I think, for the government to look at investing or creating environment for private sector development because the government had the resources to basically live off that. And I think now with the squeeze in the oil prices, they've realized that you have to create an enabling environment for private sector type investors to get in. So on that note, Cameroon is becoming, or they're creating structures such that it would be much more inviting for you and others and ourselves to operate within the Cameroon system efficiently. And there is room for investors to come into Cameroon. And I think if you look at Cameroon, you should wear the same investment hat that you look at in Nigeria, Guinea, Senegal. But the luxury of Cameroon is that it has this bilingual structure where even those of the English-speaking persuasion would feel comfortable in Cameroon. It's fairly young as investment destination goes, and I think it makes it an attractive destination.
Hi, my name is Mbia Baudouin. It happened that my name is very close to your president, Mbia. So when I'm Cameroon, I move easily because we think I'm related to the president. But I like very much Cameroon. It's a very good country. If they say if you want to visit Africa, we can visit just Cameroon one day. We get a big picture of the whole Africa because we got all the climate in Cameroon. Also, it's bilingual. It means it's a good entry point for South African to move from maybe English to Francophone side. But as I was saying now, President B has been there for ages. Now, you say that is a stability. But people see the other way around. That is an insecurity because what will happen after him? At least we see in Angola now there's been a good succession plan. Hopefully it will happen that so. But what will happen in Cameroon? There's no succession plan, the opposition is divided. What will happen after Biya? That's the first question. The second one is the currency. The currency, this is one of the good attractions of West Africa, is the currency is pegged to the euro, stable. But recently they've been talk, especially in Cameroon, people are not really eager again to have the CFA pegged to the euro because it doesn't reflect the economical state of the country. It's like an artificial pegging. And that's a big cry to remove this. Now, where do you think, where are we going with that stance? And there is maybe looming devaluation of that currency. What's your take on this point? Thank you.
Should I take the political question or the economic one, AJ?
You smarter, talk about money.
I think you're right about the lack of clear succession planning. Biya is 84, a very fit one, just as good as Mugabe is, but not with the Mugabe tendencies. The reason I said it's stable is in the sense that what creates instability in a lot of African countries is very basic. People's ability to eat. It's that simple. If folks can't eat, there's going to be a crisis. Cameroon is very rich agriculturally, so it's very rare to find folks on the street. You've been to Douala to find folks on the street panhandling. So on that basis, the issue of political posturing, as one would have it, it's not as simplistic as having change of government year 1, year 2, then you think you're going somewhere. So I'm using the word stable, politically, if you bear with me. There's a ruling party. There's a bunch of opposition characters, but they're not cohesive, and they don't seem to create any sense of the stability in terms of their policies. They seem to mirror the government. The potential political crisis up in the north, where you have legacies of Boko Haram, which is a spillover from Nigeria, that is still there. It's contained. It's not further south in the rest of the country. The next election is coming up in 2019, I think, and Biya has been there for 34 years, and he plans to run again. So we think he's going to win. That's why I'm saying there's going to be stability, because there's no opposition. I think what we tend to focus on as investors, potential investors, is this environment enabling? Is the government engaging? And do we have the requisite policies in place, to attract investors? Lately they're making the right noises, and the sort of regulatory environment is such that investors are coming in, not in droves as you'd find in Nigeria or in Ivory Coast. But I think it's a function of the government's ability to market itself. But it doesn't take away the fact that it's an attractive investment destination. NJ?
I do think change is inevitable in the area. You are going to find more happening. Mr. Nyong had mentioned earlier about the demographics. When you have a country where 60% of the population is under 40, you are going to see a more demand for good governance, right succession planning and transition, and you're going to see that. My generation, I'm under 40. My generation has probably seen only one president in Cameroon. But also, my generation is more connected than any other generation. My generation, what do we have? We have WhatsApp, we have Twitter, we have Facebook, we have everything. And what's the other one? Snapchat, and I'm getting to 40. Every 2-3 months, I get to my office and my staff, they have some other new app. So it's well connected, and there is always this strong drive you're going to see. Of course, power never concedes anything without a demand. Anything you've seen change in Cameroon has always been people really ensuring that this happens. I think politically, you are seeing some kind of shifts. I don't think whatever political shifts you have in Cameroon, it's going to degenerate into a Congo or into a crisis-ridden country. I do think it is. You would find a peaceful transition in Cameroon. Personally, am I happy with all the constitutional and their practices? No, I'm not. But I think that there's a process for transition, and it is going to be respected. There is so much at stake in the country to have it, some kind of long winding crisis. And when you look at, you have to look at the optimism level of Cameroonians and where they're going. And I think that is an indicator of what you will see. There are more Cameroonians today migrating from the diaspora back into Cameroon to do more. And that already tells you of an economy and people getting more confident that they can really do something better there, as compared to most people trying to migrate. I remember when I was a kid in Cameroon, if you went into the embassies, the lines were horrible. I knew of people who died trying to migrate to Europe. But right now, everybody is coming back home. You don't find, Douala is not Santon, Yaoundé is not Pretoria, but you find people coming in every day. There is this generation that is saying, we have it in our own hands. We are going to start it and everything. Take me as an example. Coming back home and building one of the largest corporate practice in the continent, it is possible. And I think it's up to us, as much as we look at foreign investment and we look at investment coming from out there, it's up to us to create that optimism by what we do. If we, as Cameroonians or as Africans looking at that market, and not really do the right thing and create saves and create a space for you to invest, then it represents a poverty in ambition. And I think Cameroon is seeing that, and I think you will find a lot of like-minded people in the country that really want to drive things. Are they 100% happy with the political structure? I don't think so. But they are defying the odds, and they are finding ways to get things done. And I think if you can do it in Nigeria, Cameroon is easier.
Answer your question? Go for it.
I think we didn't address the currency issue.
For the currency, but
I'll leave it to him. I'm not that smart.
All right, I have just to go for another meeting quickly outside. I want just now maybe just to remark that the thing that you say for the hotel is very true. When you go to Yaoundé, there's only one Hilton, no other choices. So anyone who will go there for a hotel, I think it will be a big plus. You can respond for the currency. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just I have to step out quickly for another meeting.
Sorry, before you ask your question, let me just respond to the CFA, the currency situation. I think there's a lot of speculation on the link with the CFA and the euro and its implications. A lot of that is on the backdrop of this precipitous fall in oil prices, and which it's the noise you get. It's from Chad, Cameroon, Equatorial Guinea, Gabon, all those CFA countries who have this peg with the euro. In the absence of this collapse in the oil prices, where they've been massive beneficiaries of that, there was no talk about the CFA and its value, because the CFA has been overvalued, as you'd imagine, over the years. So it's a conversation that you hear all over the bars and offices, but I'm not sure at what level the government is committed in changing the structure. It's a legacy arrangement with France and its Francophone African countries. We can have another 2 days of conversation on that. But right now, I'm not too sure yet. Most of them, Cameroon, Chad, are all beneficiaries of facilities now from IMF, given the sort of precarious position that the economies are in terms of revenue generation. It's a tough one to basically speculate whether the devaluation is going to take place or not. But it's overvalued, no doubt.
Afternoon, thanks for I think quick question. You mentioned that obviously there's only one hotel that's really great. And I think one of the other things you say everybody's very positive, and it's very great to hear. But what has been the main blockages? You mentioned you grew up, same building, still there, still being occupied. And you look at Cameroon, I've climbed Mount Cameroon, I've spent time at the beach. I think it's the most beautiful place on the planet. I still look at it and
Did you have poisson braisé?
Sorry?
Did you have poisson braisé?
No, I did not. I suffered too much while climbing. But I think the reality is you look at that, and the time I spent there, and I'm wondering why, like Nigeria, like Ghana, why haven't they rushed to Cameroon? Why is everybody not there? Why is all the other various hotel groups not investing the money in the country? The question ultimately is, what is the blockages? Why are they not coming? Otherwise, they would have been there. And I think that's always a question. I've quietly said 4 years ago, hold on, Cameroon's coming, it's coming. Sit tight, it's coming, guys. And I think we're yet to see Cameroon come and really bloom. And I still believe it will. I kind of believe that there's just a bit of a requirement of focus shift required into the leisure market. And I do think the leisure industry is a big core. It's got beautiful beaches, it's got potential, etc. But what is the major blockages, in your opinion, that is hindering the investment, the big hotel groups, the big business coming in, doing all of these developments? What do you, in your opinion, what is that?
I think it has to do with the government. Oftentimes, when you have the same government forever, they tend to get into some kind of lethargy in terms of creativity, in terms of looking at investment options, and particularly governments that have been dependent on oil for their revenue. Tax collection was not significant, so they tend to be a bit too lackadaisical in terms of creativity about what to do with the economies. We see that even in Nigeria. It's only when you start getting a squeeze in that revenue stream, then you start looking at other aspects of the environment or the economy about what to do. Before the advent of oil in Cameroon, Cameroon was a good tourist destination. I mean, I'm glad you went to Mount Cameroon. By the way, poisson braisé is a grilled fish. It's very peculiar from, I'll take it there next time, we'll have some. The tourism was a big industry in Cameroon before the advent of oil. And when this government came into power in 1982, I think they sort of lost focus because there was a significant inflow of resources from the oil space, and they just didn't prioritize properly, and consequently didn't advertise the opportunities within the country because they were getting all this windfall from the oil space. And I think with the squeeze in the oil prices, you can see the shift. In fact, we started engaging because, as NJ would say, I mean, we're all Cameroonians. We decided to invest back in Cameroon because we assume and we thought that the demography works. It's a nice environment. It's actually within the Central African region. The sort of literacy level in Cameroon is very high. So labor is very cheap. The unions are not as problematic. as in other markets. So it's very easy, to set up a structure, set up a business in Cameroon. The reason again for the slowness in attracting investment just has to do with the government. I think the government was a little bit too comfortable until recently when the windfall from oil wasn't there. And it's very difficult to, pull cash out of, the black gold when it was dwindling in terms of its value in the market. One of our businesses in the oil and gas space, and we see that also. And it's good. I think the oil-dependent economies, if you look all over Africa, haven't done very well because the government, again, we're not too creative. I mean, oil, you don't have to be too creative to make money out of it. You sunk a shaft, it comes up, you flip it, you do well. Whereas if you don't have that, then you become more creative in attracting other investment opportunities. You can see what is happening in Rwanda. Again, it's the quality of the leadership, by the way. I mean, Rwanda has nothing. Coffee, tea, but everybody wants to go to Rwanda, whereas Cameroon basically is a gateway to a couple of countries that have tremendous opportunity, but nobody's rushing to it yet, because the government has not been as proactive in managing its investment case. Some of us are doing it, voluntarily because we think we're from there, we know it a bit more, and we are using some of our opportunities and resources we've garnered from somewhere else. That's why we believe from the short term we've been back home investing that it's a tremendous investment destination. And I think it will pick up. There's no choice. As Angie was mentioning, the demographic shift is such that there has to be some kind of an adjustment in terms of attitude. And we're seeing that even with our engagement with the government.
Sometimes I always say, as much as they try, I think to add to what Mr. Nyong'o says, I think a lot comes from incentives. They have incentives. Most of the incentives are not publicly known. And it creates an environment where you have to go in there and negotiate the kind of incentives you need. But if you have, talking about an enabling environment, one, cut down, if you move with cutting down the time when it takes to create and release an entity, and you also give out a blanket policy. It's not hard to say, listen, we are going to give a blanket exoneration for new investment. We're going to guarantee certain investment, which are there. One of the least most marketed countries is in Cameroon. They have done the branding job and the PR job is, forgive my French, really horrible. And I think there's a lot of really, really good things that you can find, but they just have not been able to really, really talk about what is there for investors to really take advantage of it. But again, like what Mr. Nyong'o mentions, the quality of leadership, not just at the highest level, but even at the regional level, it also impacts how you can really drive these investment flows. What you find sometimes is you have people who are very disconnected and don't really appreciate how investment works. I'll give you an example. If you come into South Africa, your first opinion of South Africa is its airports, and if you come through the airports and you don't get treated well, it gives you you hold back a little bit. And I think that first impression on going in, seeing the best hotels, knowing you're trying to fly in, you can get your visas easy and you can book a hotel online and you can do all of these things. It gives you an impression. You say, okay, I could manage this. And I think these issues have to be addressed. Now, for me, when I see that, I do see, okay, there is a massive opportunity here to really get things going for those who are bold, are willing to go there now and really see how you can really turn that around and get maximum returns. But it's going to have to take that patience. You cannot do what I call drive-by investments in Cameroon. It's not that area. You have to be patient. You have to be willing to go down. You have to engage. You have to, you have to have some intercourse with the place. You can't just go in there and just get out there. You have to go there. You have to spend some time and find a way to get this going. Thank you. If no further questions, I'll let the smart guy give any final remarks before we bring this session. Oh.
I've got one question. I've been there twice, and I had the chance to eat pasong and plantain. Is there really land available for development in Douala and Yaoundé?
I think there is, and there is a lot. And I think Mr. Nyonga is going to expand on this issue. Before having this dialogue, we both were having a conversation. And then I used a legal word, eminent domain, and he looked at me and he said, what the hell is that? But I think there is, and I will let him expand. Outside and around the area, there is a lot of land that can be used. And some investors have been very, very lucky to have government apportion them a lot of land. And a funny thing, land in Cameroon, it's beyond lease. A foreigner can actually own the land and can actually generate, can actually do more with that, whether it is in industrial agriculture or developing real estate around. I bet they own land ownership. The laws are pretty much liberal for foreigners to own it. But I'll let Mr. Nyonga do a lot with that because he sees that a lot with various investment flows and people he works with in that area.
Clearly, if you go to Yaoundé and Douala, if you fly in, it's definitely it is on coordinated development that you see. It's like, parts of Lagos. But there is a lot of good real estate for development, good land for development. If you are interested, we can talk about it. The mushroom of this uncoordinated development just has to do with lack of central government planning or coordination. It doesn't take away the fact that the opportunities are not. In fact, right now, there are actually more opportunities for that than before, given the fact that you're having I don't want to use the word middle class, but there's a class where the spend per head is increasing because of the demographic change, and also in terms of the shift as a sort of economic focus is in terms of the labor market. So there is, there are lots of opportunities. You've been there as Angie. There's one hotel in Douala, which is equivalent to, I don't want to bastardize any particular brand here, but it's like a 3-star, it could be a passport 2 or 3-star here. But that's the main hotel in Douala. There is a need for infrastructure, no doubt, to complement whatever development you're looking at. So it's sort of a partnership with the government will be critical if you're looking at, investing significantly into Cameroon. And the government realizes that now. Before, as I said, there was a lack of focus, and it had to do with the fact that they had taken their foot off the pedal. I would encourage you to go back again and have more poisson braisé and look around.
But to close on that, I would say the fundamentals are there. When you look at a country where there is a growing middle class, you have to think about the possibilities of capturing that. When you find that growing middle class, the revenues within that middle class is high, it's higher, and they turn to need and want quality, and the purchasing power, it's there. And so those are things which I see as an attraction to really, if you're doing private investment or anything, it could really be worth it. To close, I would I don't know if Mr. Nyonga has the last word, but from me, I am really honored to be here. And it's always an honor to have a discussion about Cameroon. And I would say welcome and come anytime. And we hope that you would find much success in Cameroon if you choose to, or when you choose to go and visit or do business in the country.
This is one of the few forums that have taken place regarding Cameroon. As Angie mentioned earlier on, they haven't done a good job at marketing the investment opportunities in Cameroon. It's just a function of lethargy. we think going forward, there'll be a lot of these opportunities to talk about Cameroon, and as investors in Cameroon and as Cameroonians also, who have the luxury of having invested beyond Cameroon, we are taking it upon ourselves also to be part of this dialogue about the opportunities in Cameroon and Central Africa. So thank you again for being part of this, and if there's any questions, post this, I'm available. We're both available to chat a bit longer about what some of your interests and how we can complement each other. I want to thank you again for giving us the opportunity to talk to you or have a conversation about Cameroon.